just for context about Bright ID, we see a lot of UBI systems dealing with the fact that how do we make sure that the person that signs up represents one person, doesn't sign up again. So Bright ID is kind of creating the ID system that a lot of these UBI projects use. And we'll hear from them how they do it.
All right. You've heard a lot of interesting presentations today, and there'll be a lot more interesting presentations to come. A lot of interesting projects presenting today. They're all passionate about UBI, and so am I. I'm really passionate about UBI. I feel that this is the time for UBI. But all of these projects have a problem. And I believe that if we can solve this problem, that we can solve UBI. The problem I'm talking about is the problem of making sure that each user that comes onto the system only receives their fair share of UBI. In other words, we keep fake users out of the system. This is what Bright ID is doing. And to give you a little bit of background on this, I met up with Chris a little over a year ago, and we started collaborating on Swift Demand. At the same time, I was developing Bright ID as a solution to this fake user problem. And so there was this natural synergy between the two of us. He was working on what I felt was a really compelling UBI project, and I was working on the anti-fraud system that we were eventually going to need. So we had this journey together before Bright ID became an actual thing that we could use. We went through this journey of discovery, learning as we went what happens when you start to grow one of these UBI networks to a sizable number of users. And we were surprised by the lengths that users would go. Some users would go to defraud our system of this currency that we had created out of nothing. And we had people that, once we reached a certain amount of users, we had people that were using botnets, for instance, to control tens of thousands of accounts, fake accounts on Swift Demand. We had people that were paying Africans to take photos of their passports and use those to defraud our system. And then we had, after we switched to using selfies, we actually discovered that there were data leaks from other ICOs and exchanges where those were being circulated on the black market and being used to overcome KYC, including our own KYC. So to give you kind of a crazy example of just how weird this got. Okay, so I added the mustache and the glasses and the lollipop, but this was actually a real person that tried to, this was something that was circulating on the black market. Someone bought this apparently and then tried to use it to verify with Swift Demand. So that font right there was them trying to cross out something. It could have been Bitfinex, who knows. But writing in Swift Demand there and trying to pass that off on our system. Now the scary thing is, so this is obviously we caught this one, but the scary thing is if the Photoshop is a little bit or a lot better, then you can actually bypass the security for practically any KYC, including the one that we were using for Swift Demand at the time. So how do you solve this problem of unique identity? If you think about this, you might come up with the solution of using something that's a biometric, something that's unique to each person, say a fingerprint. And but you have to be really careful about that, because when you can't have someone self-submit that. If someone self-submits a fingerprint, it's open to abuse. You have to have someone else that's trusted that will do the recording of that and submit it for them. And so you have to have this trust connection between those people. And then again, there needs to be another trust connection between the verifier and the rest of the community, saying that, yes, this is someone that is in a position that they should be doing that. And then take birth registration as another example. So babies don't self-verify themselves at birth. There needs to be someone there. There needs to be that trust connection that happens between someone who can vouch that that birth happened and then record that with whatever the hospital and whatever government might be involved there. So there have to be these trusted connections. The only question is, are you going to do this using a centralized entity, or are you going to do this in a decentralized manner? That's the main question. And what BrightID is it's a decentralized social graph solution to the unique identity problem. And just to give you a little sense of how BrightID works, it is live. We do have our beta. To make a connection on BrightID, you scan a QR code, or you generate a QR code, scan someone else's QR code, and then you're connected. And as the graph starts to build up, there are algorithms that run in the background analyzing the graph and determining which regions of the graph represent real users and which represents fake users. Now, let's take a look at an example of a Sybil attack to see how this is actually done. So this is a large region. The blue dots represent an honest region of the graph, and then a large-scale attack is being attempted to pretty much duplicate the structure of the existing honest graph. But what you'll notice is that they're sprinkled throughout the honest region are these seed nodes. And what those are pre-trusted nodes within the honest region that allow the algorithms to identify this as the honest region and the other region as the fake region. How seeds are selected is there's several approaches to how you select the seed nodes. And I'll go into those a little bit, but this is based, so the name of the algorithm that's running this is called Sybil Rank, and it takes its inspiration from PageRank, which is something that obviously Google came up with. And these seed nodes are distributing their trust to the rest of the graph through iterative random walks. So an important improvement that we made on the Sybil Rank algorithm is discovering that you can get richer data if you, instead of the nodes representing people, if they actually represent groups. And so we created Sybil Group Rank as a way to have richer data that we could then analyze. And so groups are an important piece of BrightID, but it's really easy to create a group in BrightID. BrightID is an identity network, and so all of the actions you're doing, even though it superficially resembles something like a social network, it's really not. It's an identity network. Every action that you take is to get yourself verified or to help verify someone else. The groups also help by making this validation process very transparent. So you, after you join a group, which is easy to do, you just have to be connected to more than half the people in the group, and then you can join it. Then you can use that group as your primary group, which validates you as a unique individual. And so you can see who's validating you, and they can see that they are validating you. So there's that transparency there. And it's also easy to found a group. You just select 2 co-founders from your connections. And so we've tried this with real users. It's very easy to use. So let's talk about decentralization. That's a very important aspect of BrightID. We want to solve this problem in a decentralized manner. So we have server nodes that share with each other this connection data. When users make connections, that goes to the different nodes in the system, and it's easy for them to agree on that connection data because each connection is signed by both participants. Where there's some flexibility and possibility for healthy disagreement between the nodes is how they choose to score the graph, how they choose to decide who are the real users in the graph and who are the fake users. And the reason why I say that's healthy is so we have a baseline algorithm that we've developed that does a really good job, but we don't want it to be the end all, and we don't want to enforce that per se. We want anyone to be able to run a node and to be able to improve on what we've done. And so if someone comes up with a better algorithm or better parameters for our algorithm or a better way of selecting seeds, then they can try that out on their own node. They can generate their own scores. They can compare that with other nodes. They can see how different algorithms are doing different things and sample and bring them together to use them all in the validation process. A couple of nice things about using a decentralized as opposed to centralized is the amount of data that you need is very small compared to a centralized solution. So we can actually run BrightID with just an anonymous graph of connections. We don't need to collect anything from the users. You contrast that with a centralized solution, and there's all kinds of, they tend to collect more data than they actually need, and who knows how they're using that data sometimes. And then you have the benefit of, if there is fraud, it's easier to detect in a decentralized system. If there was fraud that being perpetrated by a centralized actor, then it would be there's no way to audit that. There's no way to know that that central actor is committing that fraud, that they're creating fake accounts for themselves to benefit from. But in a decentralized system, each of these nodes can audit the other nodes. They know how the scoring how they purport to do their scoring, and they can check that they're actually doing it the way that they've claimed that they're doing it. So we received $95,000 in funding through an Aragon Nest grant last year, and that was we were able to get ourselves to beta launch through that. We launched 3 months ago, and we're continually seeking more funding in the way of grants to really build out and expand the BrightID network. In the future, we want lots of app integrations. This is going to be the year of app integrations for BrightID, partners building on top of BrightID. And we're going to expand our seed group tools so that we can make sure that seed groups grow up at the same pace as the network. We're going to finish building our peer-to-peer network this year. And then we're going to improve the front-end experience so that users are easily guided through the actions that they need to take. So all of this is really exciting for BrightID. So if you are if you're a creator, you're working on something that needs this a unique identity solution, I encourage you to go to our website and connect with us through one of our chat channels. Talk to us, tell us about your idea. We're really interested in hearing about it. And if you just want to try out BrightID to see what it's like, we have the application is available in beta for both iPhone and Android. And if you can talk to me and I don't see Alexa here, but anyways, you can talk to me and I can show you how it works. So now it's time for questions.
So why are you a .org when Swift was a .com? I mean, why are you looking for grant money when all you really need to do is take this and figure out a business model, and then you can grow it like a for-profit?
Right. So I'm kind of like a diehard open source guy, and so I see this as something that has so many uses beyond even what Swift Demand is doing. And so I didn't want to force people to be limited to buy into like whatever Swift Demand is doing. I wanted people to take it and run with it. And also there's a synergy that's created from different types of applications. It's not just universal basic income that benefits from this. There's different types of voting applications, and there's different types of other social applications that can benefit from this. I mean, imagine a Facebook where you could flip a switch and say, I only want to see stuff from real people. I mean, these are the types of things that you can build on BrightID. And so as all of these different apps come together and build on top of it, it benefits all the other apps that are building on it. So to me, it made sense as an open source solution.
Whoa, have you approached Facebook to see if they would take their social graph and just lay it on to BrightID?
That would be really interesting if they would be on board with that. So I know that they kind of have this weird push and pull between the way they make money and stamping out fake users, because they want to provide a better user experience for people, but at the same time, it helps them if they can say that they have more users, and if there's a fake person watching videos on Facebook, maybe that's actually good for them. So I don't know how serious they are about tackling this exact problem, but yeah, definitely a synergy, like networks combining, figure out how to bring existing networks onto BrightID. I think that could be really important for sure. But no, I have not talked to.
And then you talked about seed group versus network. The seed group is just those first 3 people, right? And then the network is everything that grows off of that.
Yeah. So what happens with the seed groups are so it starts with, so the way we're handling it, and each server node that runs has the leeway to run it however they want. But the way that we're handling it and kind of doing the like the first iteration of this is that our seed groups started out with the founders of BrightID, and then we self-select other groups to be seed nodes. They kind of go through a vetting process, but we need to find ways to scale up faster. And so we're looking at making that seed group process more decentralized. That's part of the seed group tools set that we're building. So.
Not now. I'll take the next one.
Question back.
So I might have missed this point, but the way BrightID works is that you scan a QR code. So does that mean that the 2 people have to be physically present for it to, one person to approve the other person, and they can't do it remotely?
Yeah, no, it does work remotely, actually. So we wanted our social graph to be really like a really high level in terms of authenticity. So we wanted to beat out things like Facebook and Twitter in terms of authenticity. And so so our first case was these face-to-face interactions, but we need to expand beyond that, obviously. So right now you can actually do the QR codes over a video chat. We found that works really well, and I've made lots of connections myself that way. But we also want to make remote mobile-to-mobile links. And kind of the way I envision that happening, again, for this maximum authenticity, is that you would have a short, maybe 5-second video conversation with the person just to make sure it's who you really think it is before you make that connection. So again, it's a little bit higher, well, perhaps even a lot higher bar than something like Facebook, but that's the way it needs to be if you really want to keep those fake users out of the system. Yeah.
So I know your first goal, you said you were tackling like the face-to-face interactions and
Yeah.
you're using QR codes. However, that requires a manual interaction, meaning I have to scan the QR code and so forth. What we built was, and I think we could have some synergy here, is we built a Bluetooth protocol that autonomously validates the identity as you cross paths with people in real life, rather than having to scan or bump phones. So are you looking to partner with networks to build out BrightID, or are you looking to build, or what's your, I guess, how are you looking to gain customers, and how would you work with networks such as mine for BrightID?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, we want to be able to bring in any existing networks, including Facebook, as Tim mentioned, and including any other networks that want to bring their connections into the BrightID network. And so we can have metadata about the connections. We can say, okay, these connections came from this other network. These connections came from Facebook. These connections came from Twitter. These connections came from Blue. And so it's, we have the capability to do that. And then it's up to the nodes that have their own individual systems of scoring to figure out how they want to treat that. So maybe they would say, okay, BrightID, those connections are the highest caliber. Mm-hmm. But Facebook connections, they're still worth something, but we take it down a notch. But the reason why that's valuable is because then you could potentially just come in kind of out of the cold onto BrightID and say, okay, well, because I'm bringing in my Facebook and I'm bringing in my Twitter, hey, look, I'm already validated. I didn't have to do anything because, the overlap between those graphs already showed that I'm validated.
Right.
So that's kind of the end goal of how we want this to look.
Okay. Thank you.
We got to move on.
Okay, great.
While we get that one set up, let's do 5 jumping jacks.